Welcome, design students. In this video, we're going to finish up our restaurant menu by putting a background in and putting some text on it and choosing appropriate fonts and text layout. At this point, you should have your burger all made and your accessories and your plate. And so the next step would be to put a background in. The reason I want to put a background in first is so that we choose the background color and everything else will kind of go around that in terms of color scheme and proper contrast. As you can see here, I've chosen a background for mine and I've created some title text here. I have put a box to contain the rest of the text of the menu, and I have created headings and menu items. So if you haven't done so already, I suggest you organize things in layers, all your components in layers. That makes it easier to toggle their visibility and also to move them around. This is not a layer, this is a group. See, I've grouped the burger so I can move it as one unit. And I can scale it if I want to as well, as one unit. To move the onion rings, I can't move them as a layer. But if I go in the layer and select all of them, then I can move them as a group. It also just makes it easier to sort of understand what you have if you've organized your things in layers. So as you can see here, I have my background in a layer, and I also have the text rectangle. It's not in a layer, but it's just one thing. And I have the text in layers. So let me go ahead and turn or toggle the visibility of all of these items so that I can make new ones easily. So here I have all my food items arranged at the top of the page, and I'm going to put my title up here. Notice my drink is taking up the space over here. Therefore, I think my title should sort of be grouped over this way to give it visual balance. Now, you don't have to arrange your items at the top of the page like this. You can arrange them differently, but make sure that it's visually balanced, and you'll know when you're looking at it. So let's start with the background. The first thing I'm going to do is create a layer for my background items. I'm going to click the Create New Layer button over here. Then I'm going to rename this layer Background 02, since I already have a background layer, and I'm going to drag that layer down below everything else. And then I'm going to keep that layer selected, and I'm going to create a rectangle that will contain my background texture. Now, I like to do it that way instead of just putting a background here, because that gives me more flexibility in adjusting things like opacity and layer blending. So I'm going to go ahead and create a rectangle that is the same size or slightly bigger than my menu box, or my background, my artboard, I guess I should say, or canvas. So now I have this rectangle, and I can now search for background textures, or I can create my own. So I'm going to search for seamless. Make sure your textures are seamless. I'm going to search for gingham, and I've already done this search, so it's popping up in autocomplete. Gingham is the name for this checked fabric that you always see on tablecloths. And I have excluded Pinterest from my search, and this is the way you do that. You hit, you type in dash, site, colon, whatever the site is you want to exclude, period, and an asterisk at the end, which is a wildcard that takes care of any domain ending like com or us or anything like that. And it's a good idea to exclude Pinterest because their images are difficult to use, and we want to use images here. So I have this one, and I'm going to click image search. And here are a bunch of gingham patterns. Now let's say I only want green ones. All I got to do is go to Tools, Color, and click Green. Now I've only got green ones. So I think that I like this one. And if I find one I like, all I got to do is right-click and save image as, because I'm going to use this as a texture. So I've got to save image as, and I have Chrome to set up to ask me where to put things I save from the web. If you don't have your browser set up to do this, it'll probably go into your downloads folder. So that's where you need to look for it when you're done. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And Chrome will put this down here at the bottom, and if you want to know where it is, you just click it, and that'll open it. Sorry, it opened it on my other monitor. Or you can also, I'm just going to download another one so I can show you. You can also click this to show it in the Explorer or the Finder. And that will bring up a window here showing you where it is. And you can leave that up for the next step. The next step would be to select your background rectangle that you created and go to the fill swatch and change the color fill to texture fill, and we've done this before, and then click choose image and find the image that you want to use. And here it is. Now this one has a watermark on it, so that's not a good one. Make sure you choose one that does not have a watermark on it. So I think I'm going to have to choose this one. I didn't have the rectangle selected. That one has a watermark too. There we go. Well, it's got a watermark, but I don't care. Choose one that does not have a watermark. All right. Then we can tile it if we have it selected. We can tile it differently. This is why we need it to be seamless. And because it's a rectangle, we can also adjust its opacity to lighten it up if we wanted to. And that's why I chose to make a rectangle instead of just filling the background straight up. And we can also get some more interesting effects. I'm going to search for another type of pattern. You don't have to use gingham. Obviously, you can use lots of other things. I'm going to look for leaf. And you can use a pattern of leaves. You could use lemons or fruit or any number of food items that you want. It doesn't have to be a check pattern. I've already downloaded one that I like, a leaf pattern. And another advantage of using a rectangle like this instead of filling the background is that I can simply copy it by hitting Control-C, Control-V, and then I can change its fill to another pattern and experiment with it. So I'm going to find that leaf pattern that I did. And notice, because they're layered now, the leaf pattern is now sort of blended with the gingham pattern. We can also experiment with different blending modes. That looks pretty interesting. And to get all kinds of interesting effects. Along those same lines, I'm going to hide the gingham and change this to normal. Along those same lines, we could also experiment with, I want to adjust the tiling here. We could also experiment with adding texture or depth, much like we did when we in our cute animal character project where we added a canvas texture to the page. This time I'm going to search for grunge, and I don't want green ones. You want them to be black and white. Make sure you choose one without a watermark. Like if I were to choose this one, I would have to crop this little black bar out on the bottom here, but I do like it. I've already downloaded one that I like, so I'm going to demonstrate this to you by copying that background rectangle one more time. Control-C, Control-V, and then I'm going to change its fill to the grunge pattern that I downloaded earlier. Now that just makes it look dirty, and that's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is change the blending mode to multiply, and then I could adjust the opacity of that to lessen the effect. I can also experiment with other overlay modes or other blending modes. Overlay looks really good. That adds a lot of texture to the leaves. I like that actually quite a lot, so I think I'm going to stick with that. And then I think I'm going to dial down the opacity of the leaves a little bit to make them a little less obtrusive. So that's the background I think I'm going to stick with. Another thing you can do is you can actually make your own pattern in Gravit. To do that, I would make a new design, and I would make it maybe 400 by 400 pixels, so it's high res enough, and make it square. And then you can just simply create some shapes in here, whatever kind of shapes you want. And I'm going to fill these with some colors. And then what we would do is we would export this as an image. I would suggest using PNG. And then go back to your menu item. And I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V to copy that rectangle again. And then I'm going to change the fill image to the new pattern that I just made. And because the rectangle I copied had an overlay blending mode, I ended up with this sort of happy accident here. That looks kind of interesting. And I could play around with the tiling here. And I could also change the blending mode to something else. Or I could just make it normal and adjust the opacity. Whatever you want to do. But that's how you make your own pattern to use for a fill. But I think that this is the one I like. So when we come back, we're going to put text on this thing and finish it up. And I'll see you then.